The security environment is changing rapidly, and one of the primary things that we've noticed is that our ability to keep pace and conduct operations in a hybrid environment, meaning at thresholds, competing at thresholds below war, is going to require us to use all of our options in all of our domains, whether it's space, whether it's cyber, whether it's traditional air power, land power. We're going to have to be able to conduct all those at a tempo that the adversary cannot respond to. And that's going to require new command and control structures in order to observe, orient, decide, and act at that tempo. I think most people would understand that cyber attacks have been going on for a while, both state-sponsored and others, if you will. We've seen that space is now a contested environment with demonstrated anti-satellite capability. We've seen hybrid warfare with Russia and how they treat some of the countries around them and how they conduct both conventional and unconventional attacks to achieve the effects they want. And all of those things are done in infosphere, in the space domain, and then traditional warfighting domains. And so we have to be able to respond in all of those domains as well. Hybrid warfare is the combination of conventional warfare and what we would say unconventional or asymmetric warfare. And so think the incursion of an infantry force with an armored force, while at the same time you're using social media to create panic amongst civilians so that in that panic, the infantry could come in maybe more unknown or in a more surreptitious way. The unconventional aspects that I'm talking about are definitely on display in the Middle East. So in Air Force's Central Command, we see continuous use of proxy forces by Iran. These are forces that aren't in Iran. They're in Yemen or they're in southern Iraq, but they are clearly sponsored and aided, financed in some cases, by Iran. And they carry out Iranian policy and violence, in fact, on behalf of Iran, but they do it through these proxy forces, very unconventional. Joint operations isn't too far off of multi-domain operations. I think it's a continuation of that same evolution. So if we think back to Vietnam, for example, we had 3 services fighting in 3 domains, conducting air operations, land operations, sea operations, maritime operations. But they didn't really work together. They were kind of deconflicted. They coordinated activities, but they weren't really integrated. After Goldwater-Nichols, the joint force became far more capable at integrating its capabilities, particularly land, air, and maritime capability. That became the joint force. Now we're starting to talk about space as a contested domain, cyber as a contested domain, and how do we structure all of those into the force and integrate those capabilities. The problem is we don't have a space force yet. We don't have a cyber force. So we can't just lean on saying, hey, we have a new set of joint partners to integrate. So we have to talk about integrating from a domain standpoint, and that's a different kind of integration. And that's what we've called multi-domain operations. Multi-domain operations is not as simple as saying we are currently operating in multiple domains. It's far more than operating in air, operating on the land, operating in space. It's actually combining those capabilities so that you create dilemmas for an adversary. And here's what I mean. The traditional dilemmas that we've created in the past with joint operations, you don't want to mass your forces because if you do, then you are vulnerable to air attack with those forces being massed. You also don't want to distribute your forces because then you're vulnerable to a ground attack because your forces are dispersed across the front. It's a dilemma. Do you mass forces and get attacked by the air, or do you disperse forces and get attacked by the ground? Well, the same kind of thing can be expanded out to include space and cyber. Do you put up an air layer so that you can't conduct any air operations? Well, what if we hit you from space non-kinetically? What if we strike you with cyber? Now you have to defend in a different way against cyber forces, against space forces, against air forces, and where are you going to husband your resources and attention to try to stop any kind of attack or any kind of a defense when the attack vectors can come at you from all these domains? And so trying to take advantage of all those domains and create those dilemmas for an adversary is the real power of multi-domain operations. The beauty of multi-domain operations from a coalition standpoint is that it's about warfighting domains. It's not necessarily service-oriented. It's not necessarily nationality-oriented. If you have capability to offer in that domain, then we need to be able to integrate it. Whether it's a British space capability or a German cyber capability, that shouldn't really matter to the warfighter. If you're on our team and our coalition, then we can integrate those capabilities, command and control them to continue to create those effects against an adversary. The difficulties with integrating joint and coalition capabilities is scale. The hardest part is that so many different commands, so many different nationalities will be bringing these capabilities to bear. How do you effectively command and control it? If you have global commands responsible for space and cyber, if you have national capabilities that may be resident in Europe, but you have your air, land, and sea controlled out of Central Command and a geographic combatant command, how do you plan, integrate, build a picture of all the observables, the common operational picture? How do you pull all that together in one place to have an integrated plan? That's really the toughest part. And so our answer is, don't worry about bringing it to one part. Maybe there's a way to do this virtually by sharing data, sharing information, having new technologies that connect us in ways where we had to come together in the past. Now we can do it in more of a distributed fashion. That's going to be the key to success. There's a lot of challenges with evolving command and control to support multi-domain operations. But these are all overcomable challenges. This is just the nature of evolving concepts. There will have to be new experts, people that are responsible for managing multi-domain command and control, because it's not going to be a pickup game where you drop in from your other career field, you're in an AOC, and you're just charged with multi-domain C2. It's going to be more complex than that, and you're going to have to be trained to do it. That's why we have the 13 Oscar career field, again, to help manage the mechanisms of command and control. But there's a technology piece of this as well. At its essence, command and control is situational awareness, operational decision-making, and controlling forces. Pretty obvious, but how do you build the situational awareness across all of the domains? It's about managing data. It's about data in the right place at the right time for that operational decision maker. For operational decision makers, how do you go fast enough to stay inside the enemy's OODA loop? Can we use artificial intelligence? Can we use decision support software? How can we make it easier and faster to make sound operational level decisions across all of the domains? We've got to figure that out from a technology standpoint. And then lastly, controlling the forces. We're still going to have to put an effect on an adversary in time and place, which means you have to be able to talk to your forces and describe for them the changing circumstances that they're dealing with. Here's how I think mission command and multi-domain command and control work together. Multi-domain command and control is as simple as building situational awareness, making operational decisions, and controlling forces across all of the domains at the disposal of a commander. To be able to do that effectively at the right timing and tempo means we will have to distribute and delegate authorities down to the lowest possible level. A lot of that means it'll be done with mission type orders. Here's my intent, here's what I need you to do. And at the lower levels, you'll have the authorities, the training, the competency, and the resources to execute that intent and take initiative in real time. The need to communicate is always going to be a basic function in the military. And if you can continue to communicate, you're going to be more effective than if you can't communicate. So while it might be a vulnerability, it's an opportunity. We have to recognize that C2 as a core function of the U.S. Air Force is something that we have to put investment in. We have to practice, we have to be resilient, figure out different ways to communicate so that the adversary sees it as hopeless that they can deny us completely our ability to communicate. And I don't think that's a stretch. There are plenty of corporations that are using technologies now where it is almost impossible to stop their flow of data. And they have to specifically stop the flow of data to test their recovery procedures because the normal system never breaks. This is just about investment in resiliency and recognizing how important C2 is for us, and then we won't have to worry about it. If you take down one line, we'll have other lines. If you take down one method, we'll have tertiary, secondary and tertiary methods that allow us to continue to communicate and operate at the speed that we need to. The idea of multi-domain operations, as we talked about, conducting operations in multiple domains is not sufficient. So as we start to integrate these capabilities to really get after true multi-domain ops, it's about the command and control. And so the way we see the vision of multi-domain command and control that achieves this kind of tempo, there's three aspects that I think are important. The first one is new concepts and doctrine. How we fight, the mechanics of bringing effects to bear on an adversary can't be stuck in kind of the traditional industrial age mindsets, where you have a big forward operating presence, you have data feeds that come to a central node for decision making. Those kind of industrial age thoughts, if you will, won't support multi-domain operations the way we've envisioned it. So there's going to have to be new ways of conducting these operations: virtual planning, virtual integration, more rapid access to data to build the right kinds of pictures that can be shared across multiple combatant commands. And how do the geographics and global combatant commands work together? Is there a unified battle rhythm? Is there a single tasking order? Or are these mission type orders that come out and from various ops centers to orchestrate this? These are some of the concepts and some of the doctrine that we're going to have to work out, the same as we did with joint doctrine. It wasn't sufficient just to have all the service doctrine, we had to develop joint doctrine. And so I can see that these new concepts and doctrine have to evolve with multi-domain operations. So that's number one. Number two is we have to have experts. Especially from an Air Force standpoint, we're very steeped in our starting position, meaning I was a space guy. So I know what there is to know about space operations, but I may be less versed in air operations, maybe even less versed in cyber operations. So who's the planner that knows how to integrate all those things? We have to have that multi-domain experts at a certain level in our force if we're going to be able to plan it and integrate it and command and control it effectively. So we're going to have to build that expertise. One of the ways that we're building that expertise is starting this 13 Oscar career field. It's a cross-flow career field. So you'll spend maybe 10 years in whatever your operational discipline is initially, and then a small group will transition over to become operational level command and control experts, multi-domain warfare officers, and the rest of their career will be spent doing command and control of multi-domain operations. We think that'll give it the kind of expertise that's needed to really move the ball down the field. And then the last piece, and maybe one of the most important pieces, is the technology. Again, we can't just have data sitting stagnant someplace, or an algorithm or fusion engine relying on certain data feeds to bring data halfway across the globe. These are industrial age, these are so 90s, right? That's not what we want. We're going to have to go to cloud-based structures where there's universal access to discoverable data, where you deploy algorithmic warfare rather than having data coming to you for fusion. You just send algorithms into a network of data to return the kinds of answer you need to make decisions. Using artificial intelligence, using machine learning to rapidly move through, observe, orient, decide, and act. That's the kind of technology that's going to allow us to really unleash multi-domain command and control. The changes in the command structures, global, regional, what our joint structures look like, in support of multi-domain command and control are probably insufficient for the full vision at the end. But that doesn't mean they're inadequate for current capabilities. And so although there might in the end be fundamental changes, I think it can be kind of done incrementally, because we don't need to throw the baby out with the bathwater. There's still a lot of good lessons to learn from a joint environment, how we integrate our joint capabilities that we can still leverage as we add other domains. So what really needs to change is to think about how we will get tight integration with supporting commands that are not geographically located with us. Meaning, if U.S. Space Command or U.S. Cyber Command have to be integrated into a geographic combatant command scheme of maneuver, how do we leverage ops centers and personnel and planners that are sometimes 8,000, 10,000 miles away, 12 different time zones away? How do we make sure that the planning is integrated, synchronized, so it looks like one unified multi-domain plan? That's going to require us to do some exercises, some war games, pass information, test this out, because there'll be a lot of lessons learned as we start to integrate those capabilities. But there's nothing inherently wrong with having a global combatant command versus a regional combatant command. It's just they're going to have to function slightly differently to make sure their planning and execution are tightly integrated and synchronized. The multi-domain ops center, it's this elusive being. Everybody wants to know what it looks like, how many walls it has, how many floors is it, et cetera. I think the answer is it's whatever it needs to be. So I always start with the premise that it's not going to be a single location. It's going to be multiple locations that are stitched together in a network of capability. There may be a space ops center somewhere, a cyber ops center. There's multiple geographic command, air operations center. There's a maritime operations center. There's layers and layers of joint ops centers, TOCs. It's all of those operational centers that are collaborating, integrating, and synchronizing in a network of data to build common situational awareness, and then having the right commander making operational decisions relevant to all that context in real time to direct the forces. So it's a virtual network of operation centers, not a single operation center. That's my particular view of it, but I think it's also scalable. It could be a laptop in a hotel room somewhere with a commander and some key planners around them that has access to all of the data and all the other ops centers. That could be the one for a particular operation. So I think it's scalable, it's network centric, and it can be really anywhere in the world to be effective. That's going to be the key, is that tailorable aspect of it. Today's captains, first, an incredibly talented group of people. Every time I talk to captains, I'm impressed with the things they know that I don't feel like I knew as a captain. And so I think the world of the fact that this next generation is going to be able to carry on and evolve these concepts even further. I think we're in a great place. But here's what you need to be thinking about. Test our assumptions. But test the assumptions from the standpoint of knowledge. What are the assumptions? Why were they made? Are they valid? Do they still hold valid? Are they still valid, or are there things that have changed that make them less valid? Perfectly legitimate questions. And then what do you offer? Right? What we need is people that come up with issues, come up with challenges, and then take the opportunity to find solutions to it. And so continue to question assumptions. That's going to be important. That's what I expect my young folks to do, because they don't have the baggage that some of us older people bring, right? We've been fighting in the Middle East for 27 years. I have. And so I come with all that baggage, and I can't quite break out of that mold. Captains don't have that same baggage. They need to come at it with creative solutions, innovative solutions, and think through, how could we do this differently? Not because it's different, but because it's going to be better and necessary to continue to provide capabilities and options to us senior decision makers. And so that's what I would challenge you with, is understand the way we're doing business in detail so that you can rightfully attack the assumptions and find better ways of doing it.